What's up, Jill? Can you guys hear me okay? All right. So this is part 3 of the transcript, Abby and Libby's case for Richard Allen's trial. And today we're focusing in on Amber Holder and Patrick Cicero. He's the blood spatter expert. What's up, Tony? DL, welcome back. Thank you, Jill. Anything I like? What's going on? Jerry and Jill. All right. So I think we're going to start with Amber Holder. Pretty interesting. What's up, Mark? And if you guys are interested in hearing the testimony of Jamie Jones, Richard Allen's sister, and his daughter, Brittany, you can go to my channel and find those. Also, I have a video reading Brad Weber's testimony. So if you guys are interested in hearing that, go check out the videos, the latest videos on my channel. So I haven't completely read this. I haven't read any of Patrick Cicero's testimony. I got about halfway through Amber's testimony and said, well, I better go live on this. So here we are. It's pretty interesting. Brian Solera, cheers. Welcome in. She Warrior, how you doing? We are at about the 4-minute mark. We'll get going here in about a minute. Good to see you, Sherry. Never a believer. Welcome in. Oh yeah, we added this too, guys. So make sure you follow these rules, please. Stay focused. Avoid becoming a distraction to the conversation. No personal attacks. Respect all participants and refrain from insults or targeting individuals. No trigger trolling. Do not engage in or provoke disruptive behavior or arguments. No mention of other channels. Keep discussions within the current chat and avoid referencing other channels. You get one warning. You hear that? All my badass moderators. That is your task. The task at hand. Fishy, what up? Brian, welcome. And you gifted 20 Sleuth Intuition memberships. Thank you so much. If you see that you are now a member of the Sleuth Intuition channel, members only, make sure you thank Brian Solera. That's very generous, Brian. There you go. So how you healing up? Should be good as new, what, in a couple months maybe? Louise, good to see you. Eminem, what up? Elizabeth Park, welcome. All right, let's do this. Do you guys want me to do like a stop and go where we read a little bit and then we stop and talk about it? Or would you prefer me just to kind of blow through it? K2, what up? Yeah, it must suck. Hang in there. You'll be back at it. Okay, so today we're focusing in on Patrick Cicero's testimony and also Amber Holder's. I think we're going to start with Amber Holder. She's the ex-wife of Brad Holder, testified during the pretrial hearings about statements made by her former husband, who was alleged by the defense to have ties to Odinism and potential involvement in the murders. And then we'll be looking at Patrick Cicero's testimony. Major Patrick Cicero, a blood spatter and forensics expert from the LaPorte County Sheriff's Office, was consulted by the prosecution to review crime scene evidence. So Cicero testified about blood evidence at the crime scene, specifically addressing a mark on a tree that defense attorneys claimed was a letter F. All right, maybe we'll do a little bit of more stop and go. All right, let's get this moving along here. Direct examination of Amber Holder. Almost forgot about the coffee I just made. Oh, it's ice cold. All right, questions by Mr. Baldwin. State your name for the record. Amber Holder. Amber, how old are you? I'll be 31 in November. I'm bad with dates. Dates aren't your strong suit. No, sir. What do you do for a living? I'm a manager at a public storage. And how long have you been doing that? Almost 2 years now. Was there ever a time that you were married to Brad Holder? Yes, sir. Knowing that you're bad with years, can you kind of give us a sense of when that was? Around 2018? Yeah, very interesting. You know, but it begs the question, what about his alibi and his connection to Richard Allen? Madison, welcome in. Phil Bond. Wow, Sherry, thank you. Talk about generous. Thank you for supporting the channel and what we're doing. I appreciate that. Whoa, whoa. No, thank you. Okay, so she says around 2018. Okay. How were you were actually married, is that right? Yes, sir. Did you have any children together? No. And how was the divorce? Was it acrimonious? Were you angry at everybody? Do you have a grudge against him now, or is it pleasant? It was pleasant. Did after the divorce, would you go talk to him from time to time? Yes. Okay. Were you there ever any occasions after you were separated where Brad Holder talked about the Delphi case? After we were divorced? No. Okay. What about before you were divorced? Yes. Were you separated or still together? We were still together. Okay. Tell me about what did Brad Holder tell you about the Delphi case, if anything? At the beginning of the marriage or in the middle? Let's start at the beginning. When we first got together, he said that he didn't know anything about the Delphi case, that he didn't. He never met Abby Williams. In the middle, he said that when he was drinking, that he had a fight with Patrick next to a river, and there was some blood on a rock, and that him and Patrick were fighting because Patrick wanted to up from animal slaughter to a different type of sacrifice. Whoa. It's different when you're hearing it from Amber and not through the filter of Richard Allen's defense team. But also, I think she goes back and talks to Brad Holder after speaking with Richard Allen's defense team, which kind of looks like a setup. But we'll get to that part. We'll clarify that. Poos, what up? All right. Wanted to up from animal slaughter to a different type of sacrifice. Okay. Was what was ever going on at near the water, you said? Was going on there that caused the fight in question? Brad said that they were next to the water and there was blood on a rock near it, and that Patrick wanted to up sacrificing animals to humans. Okay, did Brad Holder ever cut his own hand as part of a ritual? Yes. Tell the judge about that. He was praying to the gods using incense in a metal bowl with flames, and he sliced his own hand to use his own blood as like a type of sacrifice. And where would the blood go? Into the pan that had the incense with fire. Did he ever cut your hand in some way? Yes. Was there any difference in how that happened? Or were the blood, no, where the blood went? Did Brad ever tell you, said that early in the marriage, he said he never met Abby Williams? He said he never met Abby Williams, and he didn't know anything about the Delphi case. Okay, did that change later on? Did he say that he knew something about it or knew who might have killed those girls? He said that I brought it up because his son Logan, his middle son, kept having issues. And I sat down and talked to him, and he said that he missed Abby. So I asked, well, who's Abby? Who she was. And it was his girlfriend that apparently got murdered. So then I brought it up to Brad, and he was drinking a lot, and he said that Patrick killed Abby Williams. Did he say Patrick did that alone or with other people? He said others, and that I need to keep my mouth shut. And did he say why you needed to keep your mouth shut? If I talk, that they would kill me. Do you know if Brad Holder owns knives? Yes. Do you know how many knives approximately? No. Was it lots of knives or just a few knives? He had some at the house that we were staying in, and then he had some at his parents' house. But I don't know if he had any anywhere else. And did he make his own knives or did he buy the knives? Do you know? I'm not sure. Oh, and can you describe what at least one of the knives looked like? The knife that he used to cut his hand to praise the gods and to cut my hand was a curvy blade with a wooden handle, and it was rusty. Okay. What about runes? Did Brad Holder have runes? Yes. Okay, tell me about that. They're usually made out of animal bones, usually like an antler or something. But he cut it into like small circles, and then you usually grab like a wood burner and put your runes on it. But yes, he did have some of his own. And you, what is your religion? I follow the old Nordic gods. Okay. And what was Brad Holder's religion? He, when we first met, he said he followed the old Nordic gods, found out he was supposed to be a sixth generation Christian preacher, and he decided to pick up my religion, but he was very confusing on that. Okay, did you and Brad ever pray to Odin or other gods? We pray to our gods, well, my gods. Odin is the main god, but there is no such thing as Odinist. Okay, yeah, just thank you for saying that. But you don't think if I were to use the phrase Odinist, you don't think that's a real thing? No. Why? You can pray to one god out of all the gods, but there isn't actually an Odinist. Okay. And sorry. No, go ahead. Odin is very protective over children. So if there would be no one in my religion to sacrifice children, we protect women, children, and the only time we hurt an animal is to use every part of that animal. And again, what is your religion? I follow the old Nordic gods. Old Nordic gods. Did Brad Holder ever tell you that Pat Westfall and his crew killed the girls because one of the mothers was mixing with another race? Yes. When did that conversation occur? That conversation occurred during the marriage. He said that Abby's mom was sleeping with a black man. Did Brad ever warn you about Patrick Westfall? I know we talked about that, but yes. Why did he say you should be concerned? After we got divorced and I spoke to the two police officers at my house, they asked if I could go back and get more information. See, right here, we're going to pause because this part right here is a little suspicious, right? This is like she's now targeting him for, after she talks to law enforcement, now it's like she's trying to set him up or something. So that's a little fishy, this one little part right here. So I'm gonna read that again. After we got divorced, right? Now they're divorced. She doesn't want to be married to the guy, right? They're definitely no way I'll believe they're best friends. So after we got divorced and I spoke to the two police officers at my house, they asked if I could go back and get more information, right? So now she's like working with the cops, like undercover, like a CI. I went back and said that my best friend, sister, was talking about dating Patrick, and he told me to stay. Told us both to stay away from Patrick because he's very dangerous. Did he mention anything about a fire in Patrick Westfall? No, sir. Nothing you remember. Not that I remember. Okay, did you ever see any images on Brad's phone of kind of girls on a forest floor? What's up, CJK? So they're asking her about a photo of girls like on a forest floor. She says, yes, sir. Tell the judge about that. I seen that Brad had multiple Facebooks, and I asked him about it, and he said that he kept forgetting the passwords, and that he kept making new ones. And I asked him about a picture I saw with two women in the woods, and he said those are his friends posing as dead bodies. See, this changes everything about that photograph. Because this is kind of like her saying that Brad Holder is confirming some more details about it, which, if true, is very interesting, to say the least. She said, and I asked him about a picture I saw with two women in the woods, and he said those are his friends posing as dead bodies. So if he's confirming that they're intended to be dead bodies, that's interesting, right? Okay, why did he say there were two women posing as dead bodies in the woods? So now this is misleading right here. There should have been like an objection right here. Hold on, somebody's at my door. I need to get like a no soliciting sign. Got a lot of like salespeople. Okay, he said that they were reenacting like a sacrifice. See, if that's true, I mean, what do you guys make of that? What's up, Kelly? He said they were reenacting like a sacrifice, but his friends were playing and they weren't actually dead. And how many of those photos did you see? 2. Did Brad Holder ever tell you whether or not he and Patrick Westfall sacrificed animals? Yes. And what was the answer? He said that they went hunting for deer and stuff. Okay. Well, hunting would be different than sacrificing. I mean, not really. I want to be clear. And she says, well, hunting is kind of like a sacrifice. Yeah. I mean, if you step back and really think about it. Okay, well, maybe I'm wrong. Sorry. Because you would use the blood in a ritual like praising the gods, like Odin loved tobacco. You would lay a cigarette in the flames with the incense. You would also drop some type of sacrifice in there, either your blood or an animal's blood. See, this all seems very satanic to me. If that's true, I would believe that law enforcement would drill way down into that. Richard Allen wasn't on the radar yet, right? No, he was partially. So she's talking about the beginning, and then after the divorce, I think maybe that was closer to Richard Allen's arrest. Right? Didn't she say 2023? I'm not sure. But it just reminds me of Kagan Klein. Oh, well, why didn't you guys ever prosecute Kagan Klein? Well, he had an alibi. We pulled his phone records and the records told us that he was in Peru. Oh, okay. So he's cleared, yeah. Basically cleared. So what about Brad Holder's alibi? Like he has a timeline issue and he's cleared in 2 different ways. He's cleared with his time card, and then he's cleared by scanning in at the gym. Okay, Mr. Baldwin says, thank you. I don't have any further questions. Goal says, Mr. McClellan. McClellan says, thank you, Judge. All right, and we'll go ahead and read here in just a few questions by Mr. McClelland. If you guys have any comments, now's a good time. Yeah, we still haven't seen the Odin report, huh? We know just as much about Richard Allen being into Odinism or into praising the gods as much as we know about his relationship with Klein's. You know, we just feel like there's a lot of circumstantial evidence that wouldn't really make it shocking if, all of a sudden they made it public, like, hey, we found a connection between Richard Allen and the Kleins. Well, what if they made a connection between Richard Allen and Brad Holder? Did I tell you guys that I was kind of I can't remember who I was Facebook stalking. I think it was Richard Allen. I was looking for a Chris, right? Because during Brittany Zapanta's testimony, they asked her, it should have been stricken from the record, but it wasn't. They asked her, do you know a Chris? And she's like, yeah, because they got her into this mode of answering yes, no, right? They got her kind of going with the rhythm, and then they dropped it on her, boom, out of nowhere. Do you know anybody by the name of Chris? And she's like, yeah. She was about to start going into it, but then I think Augur objected. But yeah, it's still on the record that, remember, Richard Allen mentioned that he molested somebody named Chris. And that he molested his daughter and that he molested his sister. Well, interestingly enough, if you go listen to that video and her testimony, she's younger than Richard Allen, his half sister, by 5 years. So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe she was younger when he attacked her. She doesn't remember it. My question is, who's Chris? And if Richard Allen says, well, I'm sorry about what I did to Chris, and she's saying, yeah, I know a Chris. And I don't know, that might have been his sister. That might have been Jamie who said that, not Brittany. So who's Chris? They definitely didn't want to talk about that. Well, they were both infantry in the army, right? I thought Richard Allen was in the National Guard. I think he was in the National Guard, and then he went into the reserves, I believe. He might have been doing that weekend warrior thing. What's up, Cindy? Just got home from work. Thank you, Brian Solera and Sherry Faye. Yeah, let's thank him again. Brian Solera. So if you are now a member of this channel, don't worry, we didn't hack you. But you can thank Brian. Appreciate that. And Sherry, very generous. Very generous. You do great work. Thanks for keeping a level head when so many YouTubers are going off the deep end. Consistency. That's what we do here. That is the motto of this channel. We keep it consistent. If cops are shady, we'll point it out. If judges are shady, we'll point it out. If you sound like a damn hypocrite, we're going to point it out. The Army National Guard. Yep. All right, let's jump back in. Questions by Mr. McClellan for Amber Holder, the ex-wife of Brad Holder, claiming that Brad told her that Patrick Westfall is the Delphi killer. And we've sat down with Patrick Westfall. You know, we asked him, did you do it? Some people are hard to read. You know, usually I can get a gut reading on somebody, but with him, I couldn't. Okay, you were married to Brad Holder just the years? Like, July 1st of, doesn't have to be the exact, but the years that you were married. Well, when he started drinking and saying all that stuff, I didn't want to keep me and my children in that household, so that's fine. Do you know the years you were married? 2018? I only lasted a couple months. Okay, so just in 2018. I do believe so. Okay, and during that time, he practiced, at least in part, he practiced the same religion as you did to the old Nordic gods? Yes. And it sounds like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is it fair to say that he was conflicted on whether to practice the old Nordic god religion or Christianity? Yes. Okay. He was, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That's okay. That's okay. There are other religions that he was thinking about practicing during that time? If he was, he didn't share. Okay. You didn't know about it? Yes. And so, but at least, or at the very minimum, he was carrying, though, with practicing or praising the old Nordic gods with you, going through these ceremonies and whatnot with you at that time. Is that right? Yes, in our bedroom. Okay. And so when he would cut his hand, that would be to offer blood to the gods? Yes. When he did that to you, I mean, was that voluntary on your part? I was watching him do it and he only did it once. No, I meant, but when you said he also cut your hand. Is that right? Yes, sir. And did he hold you down and cut your hand, or did you willingly participate? That to say, okay, I want to sacrifice my blood to the gods as well. Cut my hand too. He says, no, sir. Okay, I was standing next to him. He grabbed my hand. It was very quickly, and he just did a small slice right here. Okay, all right. You said that the religion, your practice, the old Nordic gods, is that the religion that very protective over children and no one in that religion would hurt children? Is that an accurate statement? Yes. Okay. And that's a religion that Brad Holder was practicing, at least in part with you? Yes. Okay, these statements that Patrick Westfall allegedly made, did you hear any of them yourself? No, sir. And so you were getting those through Brad Holder? Yes, sir. Were you ever in the same location when Patrick Westfall made these statements? Never met him. You never met Patrick Westfall at all? No, sir. So you never heard him make any of these statements that Brad Holder was talking about? No, sir. No, I didn't. Okay, all right. During the time you were married to Brad Holder, where did you live? We lived first in an upstairs, like one bedroom apartment. That was a bad question. Hold on. Which town did you live in? Sorry. Logansport. Logansport? Did you ever move outside of Logansport after we were married? No. When you were with Brad, sorry. That was a bad question. Did you ever move outside of Logansport while you were with Brad and married to Brad? No, sir. Okay, during the time you lived with Brad, did you and Brad ever travel to Delphi? No, sir. Did you ever travel to the Monon High Bridge? No, sir. Okay, did you ever travel to Rushville? No, sir. Did you know anybody by the name of Elvis Fields? No, sir. What about Rod Abrams? No, sir. What about Johnny Messer? No, sir. Okay, do you know during the time you were together, was there ever an occasion that you knew that Brad Holder traveled to Delphi? No, sir. Did he ever travel to the Monon High Bridge? Not that I know of. Did he ever travel to Rushville? Not that I know of. Did any of those people that I mentioned ever come to your house? No, sir. Okay, and if Brad was practicing the same religion you were at the time, it would have been against your religion to hold any kind of sacrificial killing of a child? Yes, sir. To even hurt a child? Yes, sir. You said that Brad Holder owned knives. Do you own any knives? Yes, sir. What's up, Dark Side? Welcome in. Let's go to Brian Solera. Everyone, you're welcome. Felt the need to get more members involved, especially since Sleuth is one of the most dedicated and hardworking sleuths in true crime. Bam. You heard it here first, folks. Thanks, Brian. What's up, Frank? Welcome back to the Sleuth Crew. So once again, I want to thank Brian for the donation. Hooked it up. Sherry Faye, very generous. And let's welcome Frank Meister back to members only. Okay, you said that Brad Holder owned knives. Do you own any knives? Yes, sir. Are knives a big part? I don't want to say big part. Are knives a part of your religion? Yes. And so is it common for somebody who's practicing, who believes in the old Nordic gods, to have knives? Yes, sir. And when I talk about knives, I'm not talking about kitchen knives in a kitchen block. These are, I want to say, ornate knives, but these are knives that I guess aren't the regular knives you would use in a kitchen. Is that fair in saying? Yes, sir. Okay. The runes you talk about that Brad Holder made, would you make your runes as well, or runes for you as well? Yes, sir. And is that part of your religion as well? Yes, sir. Okay, the fact that you carry knives and that you make runes and that you worship the old Nordic gods, does that mean that you do sacrificial killings? No, sir. Do you know anybody that you associate with that worships the old Nordic gods that participate in sacrificial human killing? Not that I know of. Okay. Does everybody that worships the same religion you do they have knives like you and Brad Holder had? They might, but I'm not sure, sir. Is it common? We like knives, swords, hatchets, machetes. What about runes? Is it common for someone who practices your religion to have runes? Yes, sir. Okay. Do you know Abby Williams? No, sir. What about Libby German? No, sir. Were they ever at your house? No. Okay. Mr. McClellan says, Judge, just a moment, Judge. And another question for Amber. Amber, did you know Brad in 2017? No, sir. When did you meet? Doesn't have to be exact day. Just, was it the end of 2017? Did you get married? Let's back up. I'm sorry. Let me withdraw the question. You said you got married in 2018. Was it at the beginning of 2018? Maybe. How long did you know him before you got married? Probably a couple of months. So, safe to say, if you met him, it would have been, Mr. McClellan says, well, let me rephrase that, Judge. You met him a couple months before you were married. Did the two of you move in together right away? No, sir. And you didn't know him before, I guess, prior. McClellan says, well, let me back up, Judge. I'm sorry. These are bad questions. When you were with him, where did he work? He said he worked at the landfill. Okay, did you have doubts about that? No, but I had never been there or seen him working there, so I was taking him at his words. But he was working. He said yes. Mr. McClellan says, okay, I don't have any other questions, Judge. Goal says, Mr. Baldwin, redirect examination of Amber Holder. Questions by Mr. Baldwin. Brad Holder, did he talk about Patrick Well as a former friend or a current friend when you were married to him? He said that he was a former. And the reason that they were former friends is related to what? Related to the argument they had next to the river. Okay, was that part of a ritual? Was the argument over a ritual that happened? I'm not sure. He didn't go very well into detail. Something about blood on a stone. And yes, Mr. Baldwin says, okay, and all right, I have no other questions. McClellan says, I don't have any other questions, Judge. Goal. All right, thank you, Miss Holder. You may step down. All right. And I'll probably make a video tomorrow with all of the Odinist stuff, like Kevin Murphy and all, the Todd Click and all that. But next, we're going to take a look at Patrick Cicero. So give me a minute. So what do you guys think about Amber Holder? You think she's telling the truth? I believe her. But remember, she's just quoting what Brad Holder said. And he's kind of a strange guy, really. But the way she explained it is like that Brad Holder and Patrick Westphal got into an argument before the killings. Remember? The way they tried to write it in the defense memo was almost like they were explaining the Delphi murders themselves, right? Got into an argument near a water, yada, yada. But that's not true. They got into an argument prior to that about human sacrifice. So if Brad Holder has an alibi, is he trying to tell Amber that while he was busy at the landfill and working out and being near Logansport, while he was doing that, a whole group of people that he knows personally were committing the Delphi murders, including Richard Allen? Like, what is he saying? Cindy Lean, I believe her too. I also believe Elvis Field's sister. Right? People lie all the time for attention, to manipulate, control. But remember, the boy that cried wolf, the one time that he was actually telling the truth was the most important time for people to pay attention. But everybody assumes just because you're lying or that you're a known liar, that you're always lying. But that's just not the truth. Just means no one's going to believe you. Okay, Patrick Cicero, Volume 7, page 34. I think so, Poos. I think so. But the thing about Patrick Westphal is he had an alibi too. His son said, yeah, we were here all day together. That's just as good as anybody else's alibi. So the real explanation really is the strange man with the drinking problem who is all over the place, doesn't know if he's an Odinist or a Christian. Very confused. He's basically he's spiritually a transsexual. Accidentally brought his hammer to church and his little priest collar to the blot or the bloat, whatever you call it. But I think it's more likely this strange guy, for whatever reason, I think the means of manipulation or insecurity might make up a story like that, just like Elvis Fields. Right? Seems like a lonely man working on lawnmower motors. The only time his sister ever pays attention to him when he's acting like a killer. People make false confessions. Like, people want to stand up and say Richard Allen's making false confessions. Well, there's many reasons people make false confessions, but they want to, cherry pick the ones that fit into their narrative. They don't want to say, oh, well, Elvis Fields is a false confession. Why? Because I need that one. I need that so everybody thinks that I'm right. But it's not about being right. It's about being consistent. How about that? And I think Brad wanted to keep her away from Patrick, so told her he was a murderer. Yeah, maybe. If we're going to believe what Patrick Westphal said, that's what he told us in an interview, right? He told the sleuth crew, like, look, this dude was kind of weird, very insecure, and I was pretty good with the ladies. Well, if we're going to take his word at face value, it fits into what I feel like I know about Brad Holder, right? He's on a second marriage. He's into like all this Freemasonry stuff. Patrick Westphal told us he would tell like lies about his war stories. So he might just be like a habitual liar. Maybe he wanted to seem like he had inside knowledge or something. Or he's telling the truth. But once again, he has an alibi, and so does Westphal. Got to break the alibi. All right, let's continue on here. Oop. Okay, so when I deposed you last August, and I asked you when you were looking into Brad Holder for the period of time that you did you see that image? And that's the image we're talking about on his Facebook page. And your answer was yes. Yes? So now your mind has changed. I wasn't sure. That picture was in his file, and it's a Facebook picture, and I assumed it was from Brad Holder's Facebook page. I didn't ask, did you see that image somewhere on a file on from his Facebook page? I was specifically, did you see the image somewhere on his Facebook page? And you had. Did you agree with me? I would have given you the opportunity for you to say at that time, well, I don't know if it's in his Facebook page or in a file that I saw, right? Yes. So your answer then was, yes, I saw it on his Facebook page. Yes. And now that that image is creating a little problem for you, your mind has changed. I guess I assumed it was on his Facebook page because it was with other Facebook photos. So then I questioned myself, yes, I've made my point. I don't have other questions, Judge. Do you? All right. Thank you, Detective. You may step down and you may call your next witness. We call Major Pat Cicero. Would you state your name, sir? My name is Patrick Cicero. And where are you employed? I'm employed with the LaPorte County Sheriff's Office. How long have you been there? I've been there for a little over 24 years, sir. What's your rank? Current rank is a major, and I'm with the administration. And have you, in your career with the LaPorte County Sheriff's Department, worked investigations? Yes, prior to being promoted to the rank of major, I was a detective in your bureau as a chief of detectives for over 20 years. You were the chief of detectives for LaPorte County Department? Yes, sir. And do you have any specialized areas in crime scene investigation? Yes, I specialize in blood stain pattern analysis, crime scene reconstruction, forensic entomology for the practitioner, as far as collections and the investigative approach, as well as just overall crime scene investigation, sir. Do you have any certifications in that field? Yes, I am certified in that state of Indiana as a crime scene investigator. I'm also on the certification board for the state of Indiana, setting standards and making sure that investigators are certified throughout the state. And you've, therefore, I assume you've been to specialized schools in bloodstain pattern analysis. Yes, over my 20 plus years in the Detectives Bureau, I attended numerous courses, basic, advanced courses, courses in crime scene reconstruction where bloodstain pattern and analysis is incorporated with that, individual courses, certain topics in bloodstain pattern analysis as well. Are those courses that require you to pass tests and to show your proficiency? Yes. All right, let's check out the chat. Let's welcome in a Karen Hick. What up, Karen? Inquisitive. Yeah, it is kind of wild. Okay, let me get past all of his pleasantries here. He's just asking him about why he's an expert, what qualifies him as an expert. All right, let's start here. Were you asked to assist the prosecution in the prosecution in the prosecution of the murders of Abby and Libby? Yes, I was, sir. And when were you asked? February 12th, 2024. And you and I first had a conversation about that time. Is that correct? Round about that time, I believe so, sir. What materials did you examine to prepare to give an opinion and to provide an analysis on bloodstain pattern in the crime scene? I received files, electronic files, of many individual files of photographs from, I believe, 5 or 6 different officers, investigators. I received lab reports. I received post-mortem exam reports, diagrams associated with the case. Showing you 8 photographs, I'm going to ask if you recognize these and if these would be photographs that you relied upon in your examination. There, for the record, it's exhibits 30 and 37. Yes, sir, I recognize those photographs. And were these photographs provided to you when you requested a number of photographs in the case? Yes. Did you receive a lot more than these 8 photographs? Yes, sir, many files of photographs. And you said you received both crime scene photographs as well as photographs of the autopsies? Yes. And the various reports related to the crime scene and the autopsies, is that correct? That is correct, sir. Mr. Luttrell interjects, only asking that they kept under seal, but under that condition, I would ask that 30 through 37 be admitted into evidence. Jennifer Auger says, no objection. Goal says, all right, without objection, 30 through 37 are admitted and will be marked as confidential and sealed. Luttrell says, to assist the court. Goal says, okay. Back to questioning. These 2 don't have stickers on them, but they have on them handwritten numbers that correspond with the court's. Yes, sir. Sticker numbers. So I apologize if you have to scour to find the numbers. Yes, sir. Did you actually go to the scene as well? I did. And were you accompanied by a retired FBI agent, Rich Davies? Yes. And did the 2 of you, were you given time to review this, to see the scene yourself? Yes, I was, sir. And was that helpful to you in understanding the photographs and understanding the reports that you had evaluated? Yes, it was. And did you physically examine items of evidence? Yes, I examined clothing. Were these the clothing that were, what clothing did you examine? The clothing I examined was the clothing that was discovered with Abby. I want to have you describe, and well, not do it in terrific detail, but I want you to describe the blood that was documented at the crime scene as you saw it on the photographs, beginning with the blood on the tree. And as you want to look at it, reflect and refer to the photographs. If you would state the number for the record as to what? Sure. If you want to begin by what is Exhibit 30 and what does that show us? Exhibit 30 is kind of an overall mid-range photograph of a tree, as well as descendants that are in the background. Decedents, sorry. I was right the first time. In the foreground, near the bottom of the photograph. There was a blood stain on the ground that I observed and categorized as accumulation of blood that would be consistent with the pooling. It would be very noticeable if the surface was not forested floor, but it was large enough and it appeared voluminous enough that it would be consistent with a pool of blood stains. And so when we refer later in the photograph to blood on a tree, that tree is pictured in Exhibit 30. It is, sir. It's in the foreground. Yes, sir. Okay, what does 31 show us? 31 shows us a more close-up photograph of the floor, the forested floor, leaf litter with blood stains on them. And that's also 31. Is it a close-up of what's pictured in the portion of 30 or Exhibit 30? It's not as readily, easily viewed in 30, but I know where the general location is in the photographs. It's easily viewed on a computer due to printing quality, but it's associated with the areas that I observed in front of the tree, almost like, I believe it was like a little bit northeast of the tree. Northeast. Okay. Exhibit 32, what does that show us? This is another photograph of the tree, a different angle that the photographer took. You can see the decedents in the background. If it is of the tree, more on the north side of the tree and showing bloodstains upon the tree. And the next is 33, I believe. Yes, sir. This would be, again, the tree, a more closer shot of the tree. It's bloodstains, I believe, on the more northern part of the tree. More of the same. And what is the next 35? This is the tree again with the scale. I'm sorry, this is 34. I'm sorry, 34. It's a picture of the tree with the scale. It's scaling out scaling out the blood stains, specifically the blood stain in the center, which I had described as an upside down L shape. Did you see references in the examination or in reviewing reports of a tree noted as with the letter F? I did, sir. See any reference to that in the materials you reviewed? Yes, sir. And we'll get to why in a moment. But does that appear to you to be a symbol F on the tree? No, it appears like an upside down L to me. In terms of its configuration, yes. Okay, what's the next photograph? What number is it? And that would be photograph 35. This would be the photograph of the F upside down L without the scale. But this time it's the discoloration of the stain was due to an additive or a chemical reagent called crystal violet. Have you used that chemical yourself? Many times. And what is the purpose of using that chemical? It is to enhance visualization of bloodstains. The actual chemical will basically pigment or change the color for more easy viewing. And is it in your understanding that the crime scene officers returned in the daylight a following day and applied these chemicals to the tree and took the photograph at that time? Yes, that's my understanding. Did that help you appreciate and more fully understand the configuration of the blood stain pattern on the tree? It did, as I can understand why individuals would say that it looks like an F. What's missing to the F is an F, would be the lower horizontal bar to make it an F. There's not one there, so that's why I had to call it an upside down L. Had you note on the numerous photographs that you reviewed of the crime scene and perhaps even your trip there yourself this spring, but did you note any reddish tint or pinkish tint to the bark on that tree at certain locations? Yes, I did. In some of the crime scene photographs, does that in effect provide a visual distortion of what is on the tree? Yes, it could. What's the next photograph after the chemical applied photograph? It would be photograph number 36. What does 36 show us? It shows the decedents. I believe the photographer is facing the camera towards the north. So the decedents are now in a different location. On the left of the photograph, there's a large accumulation of blood, which would be consistent with pooling. And did we get to the end? Is there a 37? 37 is the last one. I'm sorry. I'm on 36. Okay, go to 37 then. Yes, sir. What is that? This is like a topographical type of photograph. I believe the investigators were on a ladder or some type, and you can clearly see again the discoloration, which would be to the west of the decedents, especially west of Abby. And again, the decedents laying supine on the forced floor. Major Cicero, I'd like you to give some detail about the blood stain that you saw on the tree. Would you describe its approximate size and distribution of the blood as you saw it? Yes, sir. On the northeastern part of the tree, where the symbol, again, I had described as an upside down L, we'll focus on that area. The overall pattern was, I believe, like 3.4 by 7 inches approximately. The pattern consisted of several different blood stain patterns. Trace, not trace, but transfer blood stains. I observed approximately 6 individual spatters, and then more on the upper left portion of the area on the pattern. Again, transfer stains to that left of the upside down L. Of course, and the L, all consistent with transfer. And what do you mean by transfer? Transfer is the definition for the terminology is a bloody object that comes in contact with another object and transferring the blood over. And I believe the court is well aware of some of these terms, but would you distinguish for us what you mean by spatter versus the other transfer that you saw? Spatter consists of individual droplets of blood that had energy was applied to blood to break it up. And then the target surface being the tree had impacted with the tree, and that is spatter. Usually, spatter is in the realm of 1 to 4 millimeters in size. In this case, the sizes were 1 to 3, if I remember correctly. Approximately 1 to 3 millimeters in size. Also, one other additional pattern that's referred to as a flow was also observed in the vertical portion of the L. So that kind of makes the middle of the F is what it sounds like. And that's what we said, right? We have videos of this and we described it exactly like Cicero is doing right now. This is exactly what we described. So voluminous amount of blood to create flow from gravity. This was after the transfer was made. And we said it was most likely the middle of Libby's hand, right? So that's going to be the most accumulation of the blood, which will cause dripping because of the weight and gravity. So we said that. So we're not completely hopeless. I says, yes, in my analysis, I defined it or identified 3 areas of blood stains. Of course, I just described the one on the northeastern portion of the tree. On the more north, or basically to the right, approximately 4 feet from the base of the tree, I observed more transfer stains. As a matter of fact, those transfer stains, a couple of areas of transfer stains were quite voluminous. You can see with the darker red, darker brown application when it dried. Directly below that, those stains was another set or was another series of transfer stains, approximately 2 feet, a little more than 2 feet from the base of the tree as well. Was there a section of ground or a distance from the tree where there was a large pool of blood? What was documented by photographs? Yes, the large pool or pooling accumulation of blood was more to the south of the tree, and I believe maybe a few feet to the west of Abby's foot. Could you point to that area, pooling for the court, and identify which photographs we're looking at? In Exhibit 36, the pooling, Your Honor, would be right here. In Exhibit 37, Your Honor, the pooling would be right there. In between the blood at the base of, near the base of the tree and the pooling, was there also documented blood in between those 2 points? Yes, there was 2 other areas according to the reports and the diagram. Were there 2 smaller areas? They'd be very small, I'd say, just smaller than a large one observed in 36 and 37. That could be considered accumulations. It lacked drips or other descriptives that we use for blood, and when we look at the blood and provide with the definition. But these areas, again, were much smaller, and depending upon the surface, the soil, and the leaf litter, If there was a tile floor, a smooth, non-porous, it would be large enough that it would be a smaller pooling. Now let's go to your analysis of the blood on the body of Libby. Okay. Did you study those photographs and read the descriptions and reporting, but did you yourself study those photographs of her body? Yes. And you had dozens of photographs of that. I did, yes. Would you give just a brief overall description of where, well, let me approach it this way. Beginning at, you examined the lab reports that were submitted in this case as well. Is that right? I did. Specifically DNA? Yes, sir. And what did you find in terms of the scene at the tree, the base of the tree? The smaller amount away from that base, and then the large pool. Whose blood was identified with those portions? All the blood, according to the DNA reports, originated from Libby German. And the only blood identified as Abby's blood was right there, either on her body or very adjacent to it. Yes, that's correct. Would you describe for the court what you can discern about the movement of Libby German's body from the tree to where she was found? Yes. So observing the small accumulations that would indicate that Libby was mobile at the time of the bloodshed, when the bloodshed occurred. Likewise, blood stains consistent with the transfer was observed on the bottom of her foot, indicating that she was standing at some point. So all the blood on the tree, the blood that's to the northeast of the tree, and the areas, again, smaller areas, 2 areas noted by the investigators in large pooling, all Libby's blood. So what this tells me, guys, is our theory about how one attacker could handle 2 teenage victims. Well, if they're naked and running, remember, they're going to have their clothing in their hands bundled. So nobody really needs to hold their hands behind their back. So if Libby's moving, it sounds to me that she tried to take off. That's why she dropped her shoe and some of her clothing. Her and Abby tried to get out of there. You know, they crossed the creek. They knew it was shallow. It doesn't have to be Richard Allen that selected that area. Abby and Libby were familiar with that location, and they knew that it was shallow there. You know, just by instincts, you know, we'll run this way. We've crossed it before, perhaps. But you're doing that with your clothing in your hand, because you know when you get away, you don't want to wander the streets naked. So you're thinking, I'll grab my clothes. When I get away, I'll put my clothes back on. I think they might have gotten away. I think maybe even Richard Allen had to put his clothes back on, or some of his clothing back on. And then he gave chase. He catches up to them right where they found the F tree. So from what I'm hearing, he probably pressed her up against that tree. She's holding the clothing in her arms. So no second killer or third person really needs to be holding her arms behind her, you know, while he attacks. She's just in shock at this point. Like, let us go. And he's just going crazy, you know, just swiping away. And it's at that point what we're hearing from Cicero right here, where she's walking and the crime scene is telling him a story of her moving. You know, it's hitting her foot. So that fits with our theory. So it would be at this point that she drops the clothes, right? She's holding on to her clothing. It would be at that very moment she drops them, grabs the wound on her neck, causing the blood on her hands. She travels maybe a few steps and then falls over. Abby alone with the killer, he's not sure what to do. He's like, she was running, I had to stop her. She put up a fight. Now he's thinking, what do I do now? I have this other girl. I know I have to kill her too. So right there, if Libby just dropped her clothing, that's why Abby is redressed in her clothes, because they're right there. She just dropped them. Where are Abby's clothes? Well, we know that they went downriver. She's not going to sit around and go get those clothes. She can't. She's got to keep running. But this son of a bitch caught up to him. He gave her the opportunity to redress. Here, he said, put on those clothes. And I think maybe even convinced her that he wasn't going to commit the murder. Okay, let's see. Likewise, Libby's body was dragged through a larger accumulation, which was noted by the pictures. You can see blood from accumulation to where her final location is, but also the transfers of blood to her, the back of her leg, and her calf. In examining the photographs of the conditions of Libby's body, are you convinced she was at some point dragged through that pool of blood to the final resting point near the tree where she's photographed? Her left arm is upraised. Yes. And the position of the left arm, is that consistent with somebody pulling her body from the area where the pulling was through that pool to the point next to the tree? Yes, it's consistent. Okay, so we have to ask, why would Richard Allen do that? Well, if he was just scared away by Brad Weber's white van, which makes sense, right? The timing is perfect. He's going to want to conceal his victims, Libby, right? He moved her because she was probably right in the sunlight, out in the open, and there's people that might see her in his mind, from the private drive, from the bridge, or from that van. So he basically found the biggest tree he could see and tried to put her body behind it. That's also, I think, what's represented by the sticks. All of the sticks are on that side of Abby and Libby's body to try to conceal them from the bridge, from the private drive, from that direction. All of the sticks are on that side of the girls' bodies. All right. I want to talk for a little bit about the blood on Abby's body. Well, first, before we leave Libby, is it your belief that Libby was mobile, was moving, after she received at least her first initial injury? Yes. So that makes sense, guys. You're running away. Somebody just forced you to get naked at gunpoint. You do what they tell you. It's not worth your life. You're hoping to get away by the time. So smack dab, I think Richard Allen was taking his clothes off too. He's forcing them to, and he's taking his clothes off as well. But right at that very moment, here comes Brad Weber. The girls probably started screaming at him. But because of that cliff right there, I don't think he heard them. Or they didn't scream at all, and they just took that opportunity to take off. Richard Allen stayed there. He's not going to run naked. They don't care. They got to get the hell out of there. So I think he sticks around a little while, gets some of his clothes back on, and catches up to them right where the crime scene is. Okay, again, the small accumulations of blood that were observed at different locations within the immediate scene would indicate that she is in those positions, bleeding, for it to get onto the ground and accumulate in that fashion. Is it also apparent that she was at least sitting in a sitting position at some point? Based upon the blood stains that we observed, her right thigh, there is what is referred to as projected pattern observed on the thigh. And a projected pattern it's basically blood stains or blood under pressure that is being ejected out of the injury. In this case, being her neck, which coincides with what I observed on the leg. The stains ejected onto her leg and subsequent flow patterns were made flowing in the inner thigh of the leg. And that evidence itself confirms to you that she was sitting at some point with her head above her thigh. Yes, in order for that projection to be there, the target surface has to be present. And the most logical way for that to happen would be that the injury itself would have to have had been over the thigh. We can tell this mostly because of the flow patterns. The flow patterns went straight down the leg. So the best explanation for that particular pattern would be that she was most likely seated at the time. So that makes sense, right, guys? He's chasing Abby and Libby. Well, they run. They get all the way across the creek and up over the side before he even gets in the water. They might even slow down a little bit. He's putting on his clothes. He catches up they trip and fall. They drop some clothing. He catches up to them. Well, how are you going to hide your body from a creep if you're naked, holding your rest of your clothing in a bundle, wrapped, with your arms wrapped around it in front of you? He catches up to you, tells you stop moving, racks the gun, out comes the bullet, right there. There it is. That's where I caught you. You guys tried to run, I caught you. So if she's going to hide her body from this guy, she might sit down with her back against the tree, knees up, clothing in her lap, wrapped around her arms. Like, right? Isn't that's what I would do if I was naked and somebody was trying to um, embarrass me, like I would put my back up against the wall and use my clothing to cover my privates. Well, that makes you extremely vulnerable. You know, that's the only way to explain how there's um, no signs that the girls were tied up. There's just no evidence of it. Karen says, "Do you think she was telling the truth?" Who's that? DL. Abby must not have dropped her shoes. Must have not dropped her shoes. No, she must have been holding on to those. She dropped her pants and her underwear, which were probably attached together. But she did drop her jacket. And of course, it was Libby who dropped her pants and her hoodie after being attacked, right? So we can see now Cicero's giving us a picture of exactly what happened. They ran away. They were caught, I think, to hide her body from this man for some trying to create privacy. She sits down next to the tree. He might even tell them to sit down, right? Don't move. You guys sit down right here while I figure this out. And may have just made a decision and went crazy. But I don't think so. I think the reason that the wounds look different on each girl was he's mad, right? He's still in a fit of rage when he catches up to Libby. That explains the chaos. And then we try to understand, well, why is Abby wearing Libby's clothing? Well, because she dropped her clothes while trying to get away, and Libby dropped her clothes right there where they were captured. So he must have given Abby the opportunity to get redressed. Okay, says let's talk about Abby Williams for a moment. What evidence do you believe that she was not moving upon receiving her one wound? Does she not move upon receiving that wound at all? She was in that general location the entire time. I mean, there may have been some movement, but generally it's right where she was found, where she came to her fatal injuries. So that's the picture that I'm seeing here, guys. He catches up to them, attacks Libby right away. And the reason that he was down there for an hour and 45 minutes, he was coming to the conclusion, like, do I have to do this? Do I have to kill both of them? So he's sorry for what he had to do to Abby. That's why he said that. That's why he confessed to that in jail. I'm sorry for what I did to her. Because when he killed Libby, he may have been in some kind of altered state. It happens to psychopaths where they're growling and it's not like a demonic possession. But I think when it came to Abby, he had time to sit there and consider all of his options. His decision was cold-blooded murder. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break. I'm going to go grab some water. Starting to get a little bit of a scratchy voice, but I do want to finish this testimony. So 2-minute break, intermission, and then we'll get back at it. All righty. Yeah, we're reading a horror novel, basically. Only it's real life. Pooh says, I definitely think they bolted across that river to get away. Abby lost most of her clothes. Maybe Richard Allen had Abby dressed because he was considering taking to a different location. No, I think he was considering letting her go. Like he was like, damn, what did I just do? I think he was realizing that he, who he was that day. Like, man, I am a monster. Like I always thought I was capable of this I mean, usually these crimes are preceded by fantasies. I believe he's a psychopath. But we asked the question, if the killer kidnapped them at 2:13 and he's also the muddy and bloody guy around 4:00, why was he there so long? Why was he with the victims for that long? Why did he stay with Abby and Libby for so long? Well, he may have even had possibly Abby help him. But I think he was considering his options and considering letting her go. But ultimately came to the conclusion that he could not do that. What do the blood stain evidence on her body tell you? The blood stains on her body observed flow patterns on Abby's face, which were not consistent with her final resting, meaning that either her head was turned to the side at one point, maybe her body was turned at one point. The stains were limited really to the back of the clothing where saturation occurred. And saturation is where blood accumulates and soaks into and absorbs into material, carpeting, clothing, and whatnot. The saturation, the sweatshirt was so saturated in blood, also went onto the forested floor, trickled to the right of her as well, where the pooling or accumulation occurred as well. So there was no lack of blood. Libby's covered in blood, and Abby's completely drenched in it. You just can't tell because she's wearing a black hoodie. Okay, let me ask you this. The only movement from her body that you could discern from the blood would have been a movement of her head from one side to another? Potentially, yes. Maybe her upper body was lifted up at one point to create the flow that went over her chin. Because our bodies can articulate so much. I can't, say exactly what occurred, but again, blood is a fluid. Fluids will flow towards the least resistance. And based upon the flow patterns upon her face and chin, it was consistent with some movement. Dark side, do they really think one might have had something over her mouth or something would explain why some other people that was there didn't hear anything? Yeah, it could be. He could have tied her up while he tried to clean up the crime scene. Okay. Libby had a significant amount of blood on her. Both hands, correct? Yes. Given how many violent crime scenes, let me put it this way. How many death scenes have you been to in an investigative capacity? Hundreds, sir. I don't know if it's been 20 plus years. I've been an officer for 28 years, and I've been to too many death scenes. Given the wounds to her neck, did that seem likely that she had a significant amount of blood on both hands? Absolutely. Especially the injuries and internal portion being that both carotid arteries and the jugular vein. We're talking about Libby, correct? Yes. Both the carotid arteries and the jugular vein were compromised. There would be massive blood loss as a result of that. What about the hands? What have you learned in your investigation about injuries into the neck and hands? Yeah, I believe it's a natural reaction, and you're going to be putting your hands in that blood touching portions of your body that is now being blood-soaked as well. You know, the fact that we know that Libby was mobile, blood is flowing down her shoulders, her neck. It would have been very logical that she's touching those areas as well. And she had a voluminous amount of blood on her arms and her hands as well. So that would coincide with that. But Abby did not, did she? Abby did not have any blood on her hands, nor did she have any blood on the sleeves of the sweatshirt, the dark colored sweatshirt she was wearing. In terms of, there's been some testimony, some documentation, in this case, referencing whether Abby was redressed after receiving injuries. Can you tell the court what your opinion is about whether or not, in terms of the clothing she was wearing when found, a large dark sweatshirt, a tank top, the gray sports bra, the black bra, were those items on her at the time that she received her injuries? Says yes. See, once again, we're right about that. And how can you say that? So based upon several factors, in examining the clothing, examining the photographs, there was heavy saturation to the clothing. So you could see mostly on the back and the shoulders and the neckline. And this is just the outer hoodie sweatshirt that she was wearing. In reviewing her torso, her pink sleeveless shirt, it was gray colored sports brassiere and a black colored sports brassiere. I'm sorry, just a regular brassiere. That there was no blood located on any one of those things other than the neckline or the shoulders. To the best explanation is that she's wearing it at the time. If she was dressed after the fact, we would expect to see a lot of blood transfer to the portion of the lower portions of the shirt. The sports brassiere, the brassiere, and especially her abdomen as she's being dressed. See, so once again, guys, our theory seems to be correct. We asked the question, how is there no defensive wounds? Well, Richard Allen sounds like he made them sit down, and possibly that's when he attacked Libby. She dropped her clothes, stood up, put her hand against the tree, leaving the upside down L or the F, stumbled a few feet, fell over. Libby is communicating now with their killer. He's saying, let me think. And he might even be the one who let her get dressed, right? That could explain the FBI behavioral analysis saying that there's 1 ounce of conscience left. The fact that he allowed her to get dressed is saying that it's telling them that he has some kind of a conscience. Otherwise, he wouldn't have even hesitated. He wouldn't have given her the opportunity to do that. And according to Patrick Cicero, that's exactly what happened. So we were right again, if he's right. Okay, the sticks and limbs that were near or on the bodies, you saw a photograph showing those, correct? Yes, and did you, by visiting the scene and also examining photographs, observe any indication that those, a limb, a large tree branch near Libby's body, and even the smaller sticks, would assist in concealing those bodies from view? Yes. If someone were looking from across the creek in the woods towards that direction where the girls were found, would those sticks and that large limb assist in concealing their body from someone looking in that direction? Auger says, objection, Your Honor. Cicero says, it's okay. Miss Auger says, Major Cicero, right? Yeah, it's fine. Mr. Auger says, is an expert in blood spatter analysis what someone may or may not have seen across the creek would be beyond his area of expertise? Judge Gull says, Mr. Luttrell. Luttrell says, he visited the scene, Your Honor. He looked at it from a variety of perspectives. He looked at it from the vantage point. Maybe not the specific location, but from an angle of someone across the creek. He was on the crime scene side of the creek, but he looked at it from the same angle. And I believe he can give opinions. If Dr. Perlmutter can give her opinion about a crime scene, certainly Major Cicero could. Miss Auger says, Your Honor, may I ask a preliminary question? Gull says, yes. Auger, Major Cicero, were you never at the location where the bodies were found on February 13, 2017, correct? That is correct, ma'am. Auger says, your involvement didn't come into place until I think April of 2024. He says, February 2024. I was at the scene in April. Yes, ma'am. Auger says, okay, thank you. And so you were never in the position to see what you could or couldn't see with leaves on or off the tree or anything like that, or differences in topography or anything like that in the 7 years between the time the girls were killed and the time you went to the scene. Correct. Auger says, Your Honor, I think that this would be complete speculation. We would object. Gull says, anything else? Luttrell says, it's not speculation at all, but I can ask further questions that may clear up the matter. Gull says, please do. All right, we'll take a quick break there. Good to see you, Boston Christian. Stephanie. Who else did we miss? Nope, that's it. You observed dozens and dozens of photographs taken from various locations by the crime scene tech showing from various distances the scene as it existed before the bodies were moved. Is that right? That is correct. And did you see from the benefit of those photographs and from your own visit to the scene to give it that further context, did you see any advantage or an effect to cover up or make it more difficult to see the bodies from those sticks and limbs that were present? Yes. Auger says, Your Honor, I would just renew my objection. I'm sorry, Major. Cicero says, that's okay. I was waiting for you. Auger says, it's his fault. Gull says, overruled. I'll give you some latitude. So some wiggle room. Yes, my observations in April as it pertains to topography, foliage from, leaves, there were no leaves that I observed on the trees. It's my understanding and observations of the crime scene photos that there were also no leaves in February of 2017. It's Indiana. We know when we start to get leaves. My view in April, it would be logical to conclude that the views in February of 2017 and my views in April of 2024 would be similar, that I could clearly see across the river. Or I'm sorry, the creek to the other side of the bank. I could see the path. I could see a path in the forest going up the hill. So in comparison to the scenes, though the topography may have been different somewhat, and the vegetation and the tree bark would be different over 7 years, I could still see across. And yes, I believe that especially large limbs could have been utilized to conceal especially the light-colored skin of a person who was unclothed from across the bank. Now remember, guys, each girl, Abby and Libby, had a very large, the largest of the branches placed on them went down the left side of their body, or the side that was pointing towards the private drive. And the largest sticks that were placed on each girl were placed in exactly the same place. So Libby has a large log laid across her. So it's almost as if that was his first attempt. I'll bring this huge log, lay it across them. Then I'll go grab this other large stick, place it across my second victim. And then he takes a step back and realizes it's not enough, and then begins throwing more sticks on top. Probably in a panic at that point. Okay, Major Cicero, did you take the photographs that you've shown, plus the dozen and dozens of other photographs that and the reporting by the crime scene investigators, the measurements they took? And I'm talking now specifically about the blood on the tree, and conduct an experiment yourself on testing and a hypothesis about how the blood was applied to the tree? Yes. And this is what we'll wrap up with here. Would you describe to the court what the result of your experiment was? Yes, the result of my experiment. Miss Auger interjects. Your Honor, may I ask a preliminary question? Gull says yes. Augur says, Major Cicero, the experiment you conducted, I believe you drew some of your own blood? Yes. Augur says, okay, you probably didn't do it. I think someone of your friends? Yeah, we had a law enforcement phlebotomist, sorry, can't say that word, draw my blood. So we used my blood for the experiment. And you put it in some containers? We had numerous vacutainers that they were, put into. Augur says, and you put your blood into the vacutainers. Was there any kind of anticoagulant or anything in those containers? No. Augur, no. It was just your blood? It was just my blood. I made sure that there was no anticoagulant. Augur, okay. And do you know how your blood compares to the blood of Libby or Abby? I do not. In terms of coagulation or type or anything like that, no. Augur, do you take any medications? Or do you, at the time, were you drawing your blood? I am on medications, yes, ma'am. I'm trying to, I understand, trying to be polite. You understand where I'm going with this. I take supplements and I do have medication for hypertension, for hypertension. Hypertension, okay. And do you know how your medication for hypertension affects the coagulability? That's a terrible word of your, but you know what I'm saying, right? Of your blood. It does not. Augur, okay. I have no other questions. Thank you. All right, back to questioning. Have you conducted experiments as a blood stain pattern analysis expert in the past? Many. And have you used your own blood or the blood of a colleague in order to do that experiment, those experiments? Primarily, we use animal blood in experiments. I have used my blood before. We needed blood right away to do the experiments because of time restraints. But blood, we have through studies, we have shown that blood still reacts in a predictable manner, regardless of what kind of blood it is. Blood has a certain viscosity, surface tension, cohesion, and again, it adheres to our physical laws, whether it's my blood or the blood of another. It will adhere. It will do the same. It will react the same to energy and forces applied to it. In your opinion, was the blood on that tree painted or applied deliberately, in a fashion to create a pattern or symbol, or was it a blood pattern transferred onto a tree in a non-deliberate, non-painting fashion? Based upon my observations and the results of the experiment, the best explanation for the pattern on the tree was a result of a transfer stain, not from painting. And what type of transfer stain, what type of action, what type of object did you find was the best explanation? From our experiments, and I'll briefly explain the experiments, we use many different parts of a hand from a test subject, applied different pressures, applied different amounts of volume of blood, and was placed upon the hand of the test subject. We have found that most in comparison to the stain observed on the tree, that the test subject's hand would be palm facing and substrate on the tree with the pinky finger in an upward position, and this area of the hand created the stain that was very consistent with that we observed on the tree at the crime scene. And remember, guys, we did our own experiments, exactly what this man did, and came to the same conclusions. You're pointing to the edge, not the edge of a palm, not the heel of the hand, but the edge of the palm. And you're using your left hand, is that correct? Yeah, we use the left hand. And in a horizontal fashion? Yes, but it would be this, not the edge of the palm. It would be more of the meaty area of the palm, which left a similar result. How tall was the test subject that you used? She was 5 feet 4 inches, similar to the decedent. Similar to Libby German's height? You did that intentionally? Yes. And did you try painting blood on the tree? Yes, I did. Would you describe that briefly for us? We tried painting with fingers and a stick. Obviously, we don't know if painting was a possibility, what was utilized to paint, but a logical conclusion is fingers or a stick. It is possible to paint such an upside-down L. We found it very difficult because it lacked the volume each and every time that we would try to apply. It would wipe it off our fingers, so you'd have to reapply several times in order to get the full pattern. if it was painted. A person trying to paint that blood on the tree would have to keep going back to the source of the blood. Yes, some source, yes. And did you also observe any sign, any shape of a finger when you tried using a finger that was discernible to you as you looked at it? As it relates to the painting, when we would use a finger or two fingers, we could see the very edges of the fingers, the roundness of it, each and every time, as it pertains to a finger going back to the tree. I believe that's what you're referring to. Yes. It should be noted, approximately an inch or an inch and a half, if I remember correctly. I don't have my notes with me. To the right of the upside down L again was another transfer stain that appeared to be a pattern. Either using a photograph with the chemical applied or another photograph, would you point? Yes. Would you point to the judge? Yes. What you're talking about? Your Honor, in States Exhibit 34 and 35, the area that I'm referring to is to the right. Andrew Baldwin, is it okay if I see what Ball says? Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am. Baldwin says, Judge, is it okay if I just? Gull says, okay. All right, let's take a quick break. What is going on, Boston? Mark, what up? Okay, so here's the upside down L, ma'am. Sir, and this is the stain that I'm referring to right here. And that's 34 and 35. Ma'am, I'm referring to the stain that's here that was utilized. The stain that was crystal violet was applied to. So in that stain, we did testing as well. For that particular stain, we used digits. And we found that the portion of the thumb created a stain that was similar to what we observed in the photographs of what investigators observed in February of 2017. So a thumb made the most accurate duplication of that stain on the tree that you were talking about. That's just an inch or so from Libby. Yes, and it was more of kind of an edge of a thumb, the meaty part of the thumb and the edge, not direct straight on. And we replicated this several times, and it may not have been the exact size or volume that was hard to replicate or pressure, but the shape of itself was very consistent with a certain portion of the test subject's thumb. Would this have been consistent, the blood stain that you see in the photographs on the tree after examining those photographs and then conducting your own experiments? Was that stain that you observed on the tree consistent with Libby's hand and her thumb hitting that portion of the tree while covered with blood? Yes. Auger says, objection, Your Honor. Speculation in that could have been anyone's hand, unless he's got something from the actual body that he can compare to it. I think that's complete speculation. Luttrell says he's got a DNA report, Your Honor. Gull says, okay, overruled. Auger says, but a DNA report, Your Honor, doesn't have measurements of Libby German's hand. Gull says, I understand that. Overruled. Yes, it is consistent. And is that the best explanation for the stain pattern that you saw on the tree that was in the upside down L portion? That's the best explanation given the data and the observations I made. And if that happened and Libby's blood came into contact with that tree and with her hand in the form that you described, and that hand was covered with blood, would that explain all of the blood that you saw, including the spatter and the downward flow on the L portion that you described? Yes. The spatter? I don't believe so. That could have been caused from another action. What I would expect to see with the spatter, if a hand that was contained a voluminous amount of blood struck the or made contact, we may see what's referred to as a sensation cast off. We didn't see that. This was too, it's not by any means a great distance. It's just a few, maybe an inch away. So maybe when she was reaching for the wound on her neck, she kind of splashed. It was so much blood that she was kind of splashing it around. Okay, where she saw the spatter, we would expect to see maybe some directionality. However, bloodstains, especially spatter, is direct. There's a direct correlation between the substrate surface. The surface on this tree was furrowed, very rough, cratered, layered. This spatter would have been the result of another action that occurred maybe simultaneously or shortly prior to the contact. So maybe even the killer, right? He gets blood on him and he's causing this. It's just a very small area. We're talking about a surface area that's the curvature of a tree. There could have been spatter in there in the forest that was not located, because it's hard to see blood, especially on a forest floor. You see small stains. Latrell says, thank you. I have no further questions. Gall says, Miss Auger. Cross-examination of Major Patrick Cicero. Questions by Miss Auger. What's up, Anthony? Okay, we'll try to burn through this. I'm running out of time. So we know somehow there is a pool of blood near a tree, a large pool, right? Near a tree? Yes. No. No. There was a smaller accumulation near the tree. Oh, which pool are we referring to, ma'am? I'm sorry. Well, there are several large pools of Libby's blood, correct? There is 3 smaller ones, accumulations. And there was one very large one. Okay, one very large one. Now, Libby's neck had several cuts, correct? I believe there was 3. And would you agree with me, Major Cicero, that the individual cutting Libby's neck, their hand could also be covered in blood? It's very possible, yes. And probably likely. Yes. Depends on his actions. It's very possible that what he does and how she faces the assailant, what her actions are, her movements moving away from him, the initial cut, if you will, I'm not sure which injury did that. So there's a lot of factors to automatically saying if I'm going to agree with you or not. Okay. Now you said his hand. Why do you say his hand? Mistake. Okay, thank you. A hand. All right. Now you know that someone had blood on their hand and it was transferred to the tree. Yes, ma'am. In a pattern? Yes, ma'am. Okay, and one of the patterns is an upside down L, correct? Yes. Now, did you do any analysis of any other individual's hands? I don't understand, ma'am. Anyone else? Well, you picked an individual who was 5'4", correct? Yes, ma'am. And that is because Libby German was 5'4"? Yes, ma'am. Do you know how your subject's hands compare to that of Libby German's hands? I don't, ma'am, no. So you have no idea how similar at all those 2 hands might be. When you say similar, what characteristics are you referring to? In size. Correct. And then you didn't, for instance, have any idea about the size of, let's say, Brad Holder's hand. I'm not sure who that is, ma'am. Okay, so you were just limited to your test individual. Is that correct? Yes, this experiment was merely a way to show that there's an alternate explanation other than painting. Okay, but if I want to make a pattern of an upside down L, I can recreate that with my hand, right? Yes. I can dip it in blood, or if my hand already has blood on it, and put it on a tree. Yes. And you have no idea how that blood was transferred to the tree other than that it's Libby's blood was transferred to the tree. Yes. Now, sir, if I could, you talked about Libby, and I'm looking at page 5. It's kind of the end of the first paragraph of your report. Okay. And you said bloodstain evidence could indicate Libby would have been stationary for some time at the location for the large pool and believed to be placed. Placard. Placed. Sorry. Yes, ma'am. That's the large accumulation pooling. Remember, guys, I'm reading transcripts, so sometimes it's a little hard to read. Okay, you can show me what I've looked, and I can find the placards. Can you show me on one of these exhibits where the pool is? Can you point that out? Sure, ma'am. I'm going to point it out to States Exhibit 36. Okay, hold on. Let me get there. I see what you're saying. And States Exhibit 37 right here. Of course, it's the last one I look at. Sure. Thank you. And you said her body was stationary for some time and then it was later moved? To the vicinity of the pooling to her final location where she was discovered? Yes. Now, when you say later moved, that implies to me that someone else moved her. Yes. She didn't move herself. No. And in your experience, sir, have you ever had the occasion to move a dead body? Yes. How would you compare moving a dead body to someone who's alive? Is it more difficult? I think it all depends if that person's, I believe it'd probably be the same if the person is alive, is limp, and I'm supposed to move them. Are they fighting? I don't know. And how far do you think Libby's body was moved? Well, whatever the distance was from the pooling area to her final location, whatever that may be. Perhaps it was 7, 8 feet. I'm just looking at it. I don't know a context. I don't have the scale in there. And I'm going to show, I didn't mark, I don't know which exhibit this is. Do you have the exhibit? 37. 37, okay. Can you draw on there where the track of Libby German's body went? I cannot with these photographs. It's too difficult. We'd have to have different photographs. Have you seen any photographs? Oh, I've seen all of them that show the exact path that her body took from the pooling to the tree. Wait, from the pooling to the tree? Yes. If you can actually look in the photographs, and I believe it's 36, and see the blood trail as it moves around. So it appears to me that it's a direct path from her. Her, most likely her head wound, have been in the vicinity. Head and neck would have been in the vicinity of the large pooling. So whomever would have done this would have pulled her, and as a result, the leg, the buttocks, the under the leg, and the calf also came in contact with the blood, and it drug through there, and which is indicative of staining upon the leaves and the foliage, as well as the staining observed on the back of her leg. You also said that several of the flow patterns observed on Libby's face were not consistent with her final positioning. Correct. Can you tell me what patterns those were? Well, those patterns are going across her chin, across her face, down her eye, that when you look at her final position, I believe her head is turned to the left. And what would not be consistent with the patterns that we observed on her face? Again, blood is fluid. Fluid travels in the least resistance. Gravity is a factor here, and so at some point her hand or her head was potentially turned at some point. Maybe her head was when she was, however she was picked up, her head was down. You know, if you pick up a person who is limp, because of gravity, the neck, the head would go back and would allow these flow patterns to occur. Major Cicero, I'm going to show you the defendant's exhibit UUU. So whenever you hear things like that aren't numbers, that are letters like that, UUU, I believe those are the defendant's exhibits. Have you seen that photo before? Yes, it looks very familiar from all the photos that I observed. Okay, it's probably not the best one to do this, but can you identify the flow pattern on her face that you believe has been altered? I don't believe anything has been altered. Okay, on her face, on her body, there was alterations, but the flow patterns are consistent with her positioning. Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Okay, and so at some point, her head was positioned differently with respect to the rest of her body. Her head would have, to be clear, the head would have had to have been in a different position where the blood would have flowed across the face in that manner. For her head to be like that and the blood would not flow up her chin and over her face. The face and the neck would have had to have been at some point back and turned to create that. And you're talking about the blood flow on her right cheek. Primarily her right cheek, but you know, blood does not defy gravity, so on her chin and whatnot. Auger says, move to admit UUU. Gull says, any objection? Luttrell, no objection, Your Honor. Gull, all right, without objection. UUU is admitted. McClellan jumps in, judge. Gull says, and I'll seal it. McClellan says, sorry. Yeah, can we make sure that's under seal, though? Gull says, yes. So she beat him to it. McClellan, okay, thank you, Judge. Back to questioning. Now, upon moving to Abby, yes, ma'am. Now, to be clear, you're getting all of this from photographs. Yes. Okay, and you said on the left side of Abby's neck, you observed what appeared to be coagulated and wet and dried blood. Yes. So not all of the blood had dried on the side of her neck. The side of her neck, mostly in the hoodie sweatshirt area, it's a protected place. It would not dry as quick, especially accumulations. And the flow patterns on Abby's face are also not consistent with her final position. Yeah, some of them were not. Now, page 7 on your report, you said there's no conclusion being made. Abby was nude at some point on or about February 13th, 2017. You want to see it? I'm a visual person. Yeah, I am too. Yeah, thank you. Sure, last sentence. Right. No conclusions are being made that she was completely nude. She could have been completely nude. Right. She could have had her pink shirt, gray brassiere, and black brassiere on at the time. I can't determine that. And that's what we said in our theory, guys, when we first heard about this. We figured that she wasn't completely nude. She was getting there. Richard Allen was forcing her, and I think it was right in the middle of her taking her clothes off. It was probably, Libby, take off your clothes. She took off her clothes. He turned over to Abby and said, now you need to take off your clothes. She starts taking off her clothes, and then here comes the van. And that's when the chaos erupted. I think it was very quick at first, and then Richard Allen slowed it all down and then made the decision to take Abby's life. Would you agree with me that at some point she was partially nude? Yes. Okay, you did not video record your experiment? No, sorry. Sorry? You're fine, ma'am. Okay, do you know what exhibit number that is? 37. This? Yeah, 37. Okay, Major Cicero, exhibit 37 is an aerial view of the bodies. Is that correct? Yes, I believe the investigator was on a ladder. Thanks. And you can estimate with respect to, let's say, Libby, what percentage of her body is covered by sticks? Maybe. I'm bad at this, ma'am. I'm sorry. Maybe 3 to 5%. 3% maybe. I don't know. Maybe 3. Maybe 3. Not much. Not much. No. Okay, and with respect to Abby, same question. What percentage of her body? Very small. Okay, very small percentage. And would you agree with me, sir, that there are lots of leaves? Yes. In the area? Yes. All right. And there are other sticks in the area? There are. Okay, and if I want to cover a body, do you agree with me it would be much better to use the leaves and the sticks that cover maybe 3% of the body? I don't disagree. I do disagree. So what do you think is going to draw more attention? A few pieces of sticks that are kind of creating camouflage or camouflaging the bodies, breaking up shapes? Or if you create a huge pile of sticks, you're basically creating a grave. So if you're telling me that it would be harder to notice a giant pile, 2 piles of sticks that look at a place than the bodies themselves being somewhat camouflaged, I mean, come on, guys, common sense here. Major Cicero, would you agree with me based on viewing the pictures in the crime scene, viewing these girls' injuries, it would be safe to say there was a lot of chaos out there? I would agree with that. And it would be given that it would be impossible to actually recreate what happened, given the data. Yes. Given the data, yes. Auger says, I have no further questions. Court Goal says, Mr. Luttrell, looks like there's going to be a redirect by Mr. Luttrell. Have you seen sticks on bodies at murder scenes before? Cicero says, yes, more than once. We've covered a few cases where people have covered the bodies with sticks. Even one case, it was really weird. This guy cut even length sticks and then intertwined them to where they lock into place and placed those over his victim. Very weird. Have you seen sticks used as a sort of a grid or a pattern for putting other objects on? Yes. On bodies? Would you explain what you've seen? However, the person who did it would have, covered the person. They would put it on the sides, sticks across the center and diagonal, almost building a bridge for the other sticks. The idea of concealment is to break up the pattern. And that's where I was going with it. Camouflage, you're just breaking up the pattern. And I've seen that before where they use sticks and leaves to cover up the body. Without fully covering up the body? Yeah, to try to fully cover up the body, and it never, obviously, the bodies were found. They didn't do a good job. Latrell says nothing further. Goal says, Miss Auger, looks like she's going to re-cross-examine. So more questions by Auger. Have you seen bodies that were buried? Yes, I work at the University of Tennessee in training. I bury bodies all the time and dig them up. It's part of the training. It's etymology and forensic anthropology. And other bodies that you have seen that had sticks and leaves, were they more covered or more concealed than the bodies of Abby and Libby? The ones that in my real life cases, yes, they had more sticks on them. Why they were not more sticks on this, I don't know. Auger says, okay, thank you. The court, all right, thank you, Major. You may step down. Thank you, ma'am. All right. And that's it for those two guys. We'll hang out and we'll chat for a few minutes. But overall, that's going to wrap her up. Another thanks to Brian for gifting those memberships. A huge thank you to Sherry for that awesome donation. I appreciate you. Welcome back, Frank. And don't forget, guys, try to hit that like button on the way out. And if you can, hit the Cash App. But if you can't, hit the like button. So what do you guys think? And if you want to hear the testimony of Jamie Jones, Richard Allen's sister, and Brittany Zapanta, I have those pre-recorded on videos on my channel now. If you want to go watch them, that along with Brad Weber. And the thing about Brad Weber also that I wanted to tell you guys, the reason he was so hostile is because he was deposed by Richard Allen's defense team. And it was obvious they were trying to paint him as a third-party suspect. But you guys need to remember that law enforcement already did that. They know that he was a viable person of interest. They probably haven't even given up on the possibility that he might be connected with Richard Allen. What's up, Bill? Look up Jenny Lynn Watson, a local case in my area. She was killed by her boyfriend, and he covered her body with sticks. Good to see you, Bill. Cindy, thanks for reading Sleuth. Yeah, appreciate it. All right, guys. We have been putting some money aside, and we've been getting in a few donations to help as well. But we do have plans to go take a look at the Emily Pike crime scene and also go hang out and snoop around the San Carlos Indian Reservation. We'll try to meet up with the local law enforcement there, try to grab a liaison if we could. And then probably the next week or so, we're just going to be kind of parading around Phoenix. Maybe going to famous true crime hotspots, like Jodi Arias and things like that. High profile cases, and maybe just showing off Phoenix, Chandler, Mesa, Queen Creek, Scottsdale, Avondale. I might do a few videos of just kind of walking around and talking true crime, maybe trying to get a few interviews on the street and ask them questions and things like that. So that's what you can expect from the Sleuth Intuition channel. And then at some point, I want to say at the beginning of probably mid next month, we will be taking the drone out there to look for Chelsea Grimm. So if you guys want to support any of that, you can donate to Cash App, Venmo, Zelle, consider becoming a member, whatever. You don't have to feel pressured to, but if you'd like to, that's how you can do it. And we are crowdfunded, so we appreciate all the help. Yeah, we're going to be interviewing on the street. True crime questions. Maybe even have a few items on hand to show people out there. Ask them some trick questions. Might have to hit them with the green needle. Brainstorm and the green needle. We'll take the brain games to the streets. Some Rorschach, maybe? And if you guys want to, if there's some testimony that you would like to hear before others, before we get to all of it, just shoot me an email. Let me know which testimony you want us to go over next and the reason why. So you can email me at sleuthintuition@gmail.com with that, or if you have a question. And if you're interested in being a guest on my channel, you can also email me too and tell me why. Brian, just a question. Because I know YouTube takes way too much on their end, what options are there for Canadians because Cash App is not available in Canada? We do Venmo also here and Zelle. But please, if you are going to donate, put the reason why you're donating. You can say, well, gas money for this case, gas money for that case, or whatever you pick. But I like to keep track of who's helping where and why the money's being donated. But yeah, we're good to go. Alrighty, guys, on that note, if you are part of the replay crew, you know exactly what to do. Drop a comment. We'll get back to you. Everybody else, I'll catch you on the flip side. Peace.